Hello, people again. How's it going? It's only been 30 odd minutes since last video, so I thought I'd try something a little more awesome, more fun. Anyway, I will be reading a little out of this from my blog site, which I wrote. I wrote the 10-minute studies in history and why I like studying the Second World War, 1939 to 1945. As you can find the whole entire thing, so you have to bear with me. I'm going to start writing my stuff down and talking as I read it. I'm a reader of the Bantam Jove war novels. If you ever novels, I should say novels. They're history books, little paperbacks like this. That's a Bantam war book. They are cool. I'll get to that eventually. My interest in the subject of the Second World War came about because after living on Okinawa, Japan, which I actually lived there for 2 years, the thing is, I didn't appreciate it when I was there. I wish I had appreciated it when I was there. But I really didn't appreciate the fact where I was standing was the last major battle of the war. But I did once I left, unfortunately. And the first one of the very first books I made, this is probably the very first book I ever read on the subject, was this one. Was this a biography by E.V. Sledge of his time with Peleliu and Okinawa, The Old Breed. Excellent book, very good memoir. It's a pretty good book. I mean, I like it. It got me interested in studying World War II, getting more interested in World War II. Come on, things, stop turning off. Phones. All my notes are on my phone, so that's why I'm doing it. But, it's Victor David Hanson named with The Old Breed one of the top 5 books of epic 20th century battles. Studs Terkel interviewed the author for this definitive oral history, The Good War. Now E.V. Sledge, acclaimed first-person account of fighting at Peleliu and Okinawa, returned to thrill and inspire a new generation. E.V. Sledge was part of the war's famous 1st Marine Division, 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines. Based on the notes that Sledge secretly kept in a copy of the New Testament, with The Old Breed captures what utter simplicity, and honesty the experiences of the soldier in the fierce battle of the Pacific. Here is what saved, threatened, and changed his life. Here too is the story of how he learned to hate and kill, later to love his fellow man. It was a very good book. I mean, it's an excellent book. It was the first book I read, at least the first book I remember reading about the Second World War. I don't know why this phone does this to me. Constantly turns itself off. But anyway, I was living in Orlando, Florida at the time, so I probably found it in an old used bookstore, which makes sense. The second book I remember reading, because of the first book I was reading, was this book on the actual Battle of Okinawa. If you know, I don't know if I have a map on me right here, but it's a very small island, 500 miles south of Tokyo. Let's see. I'll just read this. And the last major battle of the war, Battle of Okinawa, April 1st to June 22nd, 1945. It was the first history of the Second World War I remember reading after realizing that I had been living on an island of that war, which is probably accurate. Having to do this by memory 40-odd years later is, a challenge. But it was the start of my interest in the long and complicated history of World War II. The second book was this one I've just mentioned. The second book in terms of my entire early life as a future history nerd was The Typhoon of Steel. Woohoo! Very good. Typhoon of Steel, The Battle for Okinawa by James Bullock and William Bullock. Bantam War book, of course. They are some of the best war books, paperbacks of the war, the Pacific and the European theater, pretty much the theater of war, are the Bantam War books and the Jove War books. I love those things. I collect them whenever I find one. I buy it. But anyway, great books on this long and bloody battle against the Empire of Japan that was on the verge of collapse. These 2 books began my interest in the Second World War. I honestly don't remember many other books on the subject before these 2 books, and I don't. So I always maintain those 2 are the first ones that ever got me really interested in it. Because when I was living on Okinawa, I probably had a vague but I really hadn't gotten really into history. I was more into ancient history at that point. Sorry, I was. I just hadn't really gotten into the World War II. Oh no, I'm on Okinawa. This should be more interesting. I was a kid. I was stupid. Okay? Yeah, let's see. I, of course, had already been watching World War II movies, of course, so it wasn't like I didn't know anything about that particular war, which I did. Of course, my favorites are the set are obvious, such as The Great Escape, Steve McQueen, yay, and others. Yes, I know. Stop turning off. Yes, I know who they are, but who are, but yeah, and others. Yes, I know who they are, but I like Steve McQueen. I may have to edit that sentence. I don't know what I just said. I mean, Longest Day, great film. The Bridge Too Far is a great film. River to River Kwai is a great film. Yeah, these movies aren't exactly historically accurate up to a point, but they're still good movies. I like them. Patton, of course. Starlog 17. Midway, of course. And Without the Love Story would be nice. I'm talking about the Charlton Heston version with Henry Fonda and other people. Yes. In California. And this was before I got to Okinawa. But he taught ancient history. He didn't teach up to World War II. I know he taught up to World War One, but he didn't get up to World War II if I remember correctly. But it got me into history. It got me interested. It got me started. So after I found out it was going on in Okinawa, the last major battle of the war, I said, oh, well, I should read more. I was a strange kid. Let's see. I mean, if I had to pick my top three, would be the World War II, the American Civil War, then everything else. That is my top three things I like about it. I will study in history. Pretty much everything. But anyway, this is why okay. Let's see. This is why I enjoy studying Second World War because it is history of human nature, from leaders of nations to the men who fought the wars, and those civilians in between who suffered from both sides. There are so many good books on military leaders and those men who served under them. But the history between the wars is just as important and interesting, and that is where human nature is also important to understand. The coming war on September 1st, 1939. It's all about human nature in the end. Human history is the story of human nature, and that is why I love studying it. It's the story of why, who, when, where, and of course what happened during those years of the decades before the war and the actual war and its aftermath. Besides, one cannot discuss Second World War without actually starting with the First World War, which is very true. You can't study one without the other. Besides, one can't discuss one without the other. I don't know why it turns. It's for some reason my phone, if I don't touch it within 10 seconds, it wants to turn off. It's kind of frustrating when you're trying to not read as much. Technology, ain't it grand? The roots of the Second World War is in the First World War because nothing about human nature's ability or desire to wage war and find the reasons to do so was resolved. The First World War solved nothing. It solved absolutely nothing. It changed pretty much a lot, but it didn't solve anything. First World War is fascinating. It's you can't people who fought in the first fought in the second. A lot of the same enemies fought against each other. Not all of them, because the Japanese were actually on our side during the First World War, and so were the Italians. Let's see. Human nature didn't learn anything. Human nature didn't learn anything about ending wars by having a war that was called the War to End All Wars. And there lies the value of studying World War II, human nature, and all that makes humanity what it is. There's my reason for studying those years of the early 20th century, human nature, and in the end of the Second World War. From the history of those years of 1914 and 1918 came those who would fight in the next war to end all wars. But what is the core interest of the study of the Second World War? What leads to it? What are we studying really through all those years? And I gotta slow down. I know that's part of the problem. I'm going too fast. The core issue of those years of the first and second of those wars is human nature. It's to study human nature and all those big and little and all those things in between of human nature is never dull. One of the cornerstones of studying history is to understand the four W's of the core of history: who, why, when, where. I forgot one. Oh, what? I've got to edit this thing. I forgot to put what. I probably meant to put what, and I didn't put it in there. Who were the people those years and what became of their lives and careers? Who were the United States of America's personalities in the war, like George Patton, Douglas MacArthur, Mark Clark, James Doolittle, and of course the President of the United States of America at that time, Franklin D. Roosevelt, and of course as many others who made history on the landscape of the World War. One of the then still British Empire's personalities, such as Prime Minister Winston Churchill, personal hero of mine, and Neville Chamberlain, who should have known better, and Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery, whose ego was monstrous. But good general, great general, but had the ego the size of a small planet. And of course, King George V, who, by the way, in the King's Speech is a very good movie. You gotta watch that. And of course, The Darkest Hour with Gary Oldman playing Winston Churchill is very good. These are very good movies. The Darkest Hour, The King's Speech. The latest Midway movie is not bad. I mean, the one they made a few years ago is not a bad movie. It's a very good movie, actually. And of course, we have to talk about Premier Joseph Stalin and the Russians and the Great Depression and the rise of Hitler and all the other nuanced events of those 20 years from the end of the First World War to the beginning of the Second World War. I mean, you had the rise of Mussolini, Emperor Hirohito and what he did, and the rise of the Japanese Empire, and the Italian Empire, and the rise of socialism, and the Holocaust, and the persecution of the Jews, and the history of those 20 years between the First World War and the Second is just it's an astounding period of history. You cannot study either war while eventually talking about those in-between years because it's ridiculous to do so. I mean, it's estimated over 50 million people died in that war, in the Second World War. 6 million of them. The rise and machinations of the Zionist movement, and the rise of Arab nationalism, Lawrence of Arabia, and so on and so forth. And I mean, stop turning off. I've already said a lot of this. And the war began on September 1st, 1939. When he invaded Poland, launched the Second World War, and within 6 years, over 70 to 80 million people died, 6 million of them being Jewish via the Nazi final solution, the concentration camps. Where did I get the 50 from them? I must have misread something. Oh, that was the First World War. Okay, sorry. It was the rise of Hitler to power in Germany, the rise of the Japanese Empire, the invasion of Manchuria, and the event simply steamrolled to September 1, 1939, when Germany invaded Poland and the Second World War began. Because we solved absolutely nothing in the First World War because we basically are idiots. Human nature is fascinating. Human nature, just one is studying human nature at its worst, its best, worst, and barbaric. That is war. If you want to study human nature at its best, worst, and most barbaric, the most heroic and most bestial and cowardly, and anything else you can think of, study war. Because that is what brings out what is actually in people, and sometimes what provokes them. But this is fascinating. At least I find it fascinating. Let's see. It's an attempt to explain its nature to be heroic or a coward, or simply without mercy or can kill without even noticing the human cost. Somebody just text me. I'll get there in a minute. And of course, it's an attempt to record human nature via history to find some measure of hope in all the destructiveness across the vastness of the land, sea, and air of Earth at war. To my thinking and interest to study all of that in history before the Second World War is to better understand why there was two actually. Everything that happened in the Second World War has roots in the First. There is no difference in the human nature from those years of 1914 and 1918. I'll get to you in a minute, Natalie. To the years of 1939, 1945. It's human nature and its cause and effect on human history is why I enjoy studying the Second World War. To really understand and see human nature in all its aspects, one only needs to study human nature, humanity during war. Human nature, like history itself, is never dull. Okay, anyway. It's kind of why I'm kind of doing this, by the way. It's to teach myself to speak clearly, speak better, and to slow down. But anyway, I like studying World War II. It's fascinating. what led to it, the personalities that led to it, the machinations of empires and governments and individuals that led to it. The battles are interesting. I mean, these two books, as I said, got me into World War II. I mean, yeah, I was living on Okinawa, but I didn't appreciate where I was until after the fact, which is unfortunate. I probably would have done a little more exploring if I had, or at least more studying. But I like World War II history. I'm fascinated by all the battles and the tactics and the personalities and the good and the bad and the ugly of humanity. And believe me, it's in war. But anyway, I apologize for talking too fast. I really need to slow down. Still snowing as it was last time I did the video. Yeah. Where was this? During December, January, and February. Anyway. Yeah, I mean, I may do another video like this again, explaining more about the First World, Second World War. I mean, I find history fascinating. I can't say that enough because I don't think history is taught as if it is fascinating. It's taught like it's a place, people, and a time. That's not history. That's not studying history. There is the 5 W's: who, what, when, and where, and why. And I'm not sure why I left one out, but I'm not going to redo that again. Anyway, that's what I get for not editing my stuff very well. But I am going to try to write stuff down because it might be easier. I just need to slow down. I know that I talk too fast. That's a habit. I need to slow down. Anyway, history is human nature. It's fascinating. I mean, all the personalities and all the... Anyway, I don't want to make this too long because, I mean, that's some... I'll do separate battles off and on when I can. So, well, hopefully this wasn't too boring or too crazy. Behave yourselves, people, because you know I'm not going to. I might do one more video. It's only almost 2:30. I might do another one at 3:30. Later.